Hi, everyone. Welcome to Time Sensitive. This week, Spencer's in conversation with Eric Ripert, the executive chef and co-owner of Midtown Manhattan's French seafood restaurant, Le Bernardin, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. The author of a best-selling memoir and of several cookbooks, Eric has also been a longtime guest judge on Top Chef. What'd you guys talk about?
So we get into his cool-headed leadership style, in part stemming from his practice of Buddhism, which has transformed the way he thinks in the kitchen, in cooking, in life. We also talk about his meticulous approach to managing time and technique in the kitchen, and how that in so many ways has led to the long-term success of Le Bernardin, which has managed to maintain its 4-star rating from the New York Times since its opening in 1987. It's the only restaurant to ever have that sort of longevity, as well as maintain its 3-Michelin-star status. We also get into the enduring influence of his mother's cooking and certain emotional terrain related to his childhood. And we end the conversation on his long, deep friendship with the late Anthony Bourdain and how he thinks about that time that he got to spend with him.
Wow, I'm very interested in that. But before we get into it, we first like to thank our Season 6 sponsor, L'École School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef & Arpels. Celebrating its first decade this year, L'École, which has permanent campuses in both Paris and Hong Kong, plans to open a third space in Shanghai next year. This year, they're also opening a second space in Paris, which will feature a public library of more than 7,000 reference works on jewelry and gems. And at its main Paris space, L'École is also opening a gemothèque, or gem library, with 1,200 stones for visitors to view and even touch.
Presenting a vast array of creations, the gemothèque will bring together an incredible selection of different species and varieties of gems, treated stones, synthetic materials, and cut and raw stones. Visitors will be able to interact with the stones, which will also be available to students and researchers. In many ways, a living celebration and representation of L'École's collection, the gemothèque is the culmination of acquisitions that have taken place over many years.
You can learn more about L'École and its gemothèque at www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. And now, here's Spencer and Eric.
Hi, Eric. Welcome to Time Sensitive.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
So I'd like to start our conversation in the mountains.
Sure.
You spent your early childhood in Antibes in France, where you were born, and then Andorra, just over the Spanish border, where you moved as a young child. You've called your time in the mountains there a sort of sacred refuge. So I wanted to begin there. What lessons, if any, from your time in the mountains, hiking, camping, cooking on slate, do you take with you today?
Well, that experience was very special. I was very young. I was 10 years old, 11 years old, and a teenager when I was living in Andorra. And it was part of the lifestyle of the people living in that country, which is a very tiny, tiny country in the middle of the Pyrenees in between France and Spain. Being in contact with nature is something pretty amazing. And to live with the seasons and at the rhythm of the seasons. When it was the fall, we were going to forage for mushroom. The winter, not much, but we were skiing a lot and going to the lakes, making holes in the ice and fishing. And then in the spring, you do something else. And then it's the summer. And it's pretty amazing because it basically connects you to nature, right? And that is something that stayed with me my entire life. To be connected with nature, I think, is very important.
Was there a sort of, quote, mountain time for you? Like, in other words, did you find that time moved differently when you were in Andorra or in the mountains?
For sure. I love to go on my own, hike. And sometimes I even did more than hiking. I was like basically climbing the mountains. It was time for myself. I was a young kid, but I was still reflecting on my life, on what I wanted to do when I was going back to school. It was really something special that I enjoyed tremendously.
Your journey to New York City and to Le Bernardin was certainly its own sort of ascent, if we want to use a hiking analogy.
Yes.
And we'll get to the sort of process or some of the steps you took to get there. But first, I was hoping to just touch on the fact that this year Le Bernardin turns 50.
Yeah.
Extraordinary run. I mean, the restaurant was founded in 1972 in Paris, opened in New York in 1986. And you joined in 1991, and in 1994 were named executive chef and eventually became a co-owner in the business. Looking back, how are you thinking about your 31 extraordinary years at Le Bernardin, but also this extraordinary history, this 50-year legacy?
Well, Le Bernardin is very unique. I mean, as you mentioned, it started in Paris in a tiny street in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, 25 seats. Maggie Lecoz who's my business partner, and her brother at the time, who was the chef. She's by herself in a dining room. They have a dishwasher, and they party, and they're having fun, and it's a hip restaurant in Paris. It's a seafood restaurant. And from there, a couple of years later, they get a 1-star Michelin, and they're supposed to become serious, but they don't care. They do whatever they want. He's an autodidact. Then they have 2-star Michelin. And then they decide to come to New York, and they have this amazing space in, at the time, the Equitable building, Midtown on the west side, not a great location at the time, very close to Times Square, and in the 80s was not really a hot spot. But anyway, they have that beautiful restaurant, and New York Times give them 4-star after 3 months of opening. First time in the history of the New York Times. And since then, it has been a success in terms of attention from the media and the client support from the clientele and so on, which means that we have a great team and we are very passionate and we are very lucky to live the dream. Whatever we want to accomplish, we have been supported in our vision to create an experience for people that is very, very unique. And I'm very happy to be part of that adventure since 1991. As you mentioned, I was a very young chef. And then in 1994, I took the aim of the kitchen when Gilbert Lecoz passed away, unfortunately. And until today, I'm still reinventing Le Bernardin every day, questioning what we can do better. And the team is really, like I mentioned, like involved and passionate, and we're moving forward. We are 50 years young, not old.
Well, in 1995, you're just 29 years old, and you earn a 4-star rating from the New York Times at Le Bernardin. That 20 years later, you get it again for the 5th consecutive time. I mean, this is if I'm correct, the only restaurant to maintain this duration of time having 4 stars from the 80s all the way to now. I mean, it's extraordinary. Like, what do you attribute to this perseverance? Because it's really a reflection of what's happening in the kitchen.
In the kitchen, in a dining room, in offices, because, the clients, the first experience is on the phone. When you call, you have someone human who is answering, not a robot, not, you can, of course, make your reservation online, because today with technology, obviously, it's a pleasant experience, but you can talk to someone. So the offices are, of course, very, very important. Then the dining room is very important because it's where the clients are basically spending their evening. And the food is very important, of course. And the kitchen is very motivated, and I have a great team, and I'm very happy about that. We have been very lucky with those awards and accolades, and the New York Times is definitely a very, very important way of rating restaurants. And when you get that, you celebrate and you say thank you and you try to do better. But our industry, and especially in New York, we are very lucky. We have the New York Times, we have the Michelin, the 50 best exist now, and other classification for restaurants like La Liste, which is a French algorithm, reward Le Bernardin all the time. So it's basically telling us that we are doing the right thing. And again, we're pushing ourselves to say, okay, well, it's not enough. We can do better.
I was hoping maybe you could speak here also to Gilbert, who you mentioned, the co-founder and former executive chef.
Yeah.
Who died of a heart attack at age 48 in 1994. He had become a sort of big brother to you and brought you in to Le Bernardin in the first place. How did you respond to this moment, and how did you grow out of this news? I mean, you're basically thrown into this.
Yeah. Well, I met Gilbert after a couple of phone calls. We have a breakfast together, and he's showing me Le Bernardin. And he has something, of course, in his mind. He wants me to take care of the kitchen. And when I see Le Bernardin, it's a revelation for me. I'm like, wow, this is like a big deal. I was working at Boulet at the time downtown in Tribeca. And I gave my notice to David. And then I called Gilbert and I said, I'm starting at Le Bernardin whenever you want, but I would like to take a vacation. And he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Spain. He said, can I come with you? So my future boss wants to come with me in vacation to party in Spain. And I'm like, wow, that's going to be interesting. So we go in a vacation, we have a blast, and then we come back and we completely forget the vacation, and he's my boss. However, he was extremely supportive of everything I did, including my mistakes. And we had a great relationship until he passed away, unfortunately, like you mentioned, age 48. Maggie Lecoz asked me, she said, would you like to stay at Le Bernardin? And if you do, I would like for you to completely reinvent the menu and reinvent the food and do your food. And I said, yes. I didn't even think about it. I said, of course, it's a yes, I'm going to do that. Her last sentence was like, I don't want Le Bernardin to become a museum to the memory of my brother. I want us to move and be something else. So I'm going to take care of the dining room and the offices, and you take care of the kitchen. And that was the beginning of being thrown like that. I mean, on my own. I created the new menu, and then Ruth Rachel, who was the food critic of the New York Times, came 12 times before she gave us the 4-star rating. So she started to come in September, and we got the review the following year in April. I guess I was young, and she wanted to make sure that she wouldn't make a mistake and give a 4-star to someone who wouldn't potentially stay or will make a lot of mistake or be inconsistent. I don't know. But I was so focused and so inspired and so motivated that I didn't feel the pressure at all. I just did what I'm supposed to do, which is basically cook.
This consistency, I mean, it's fascinating to me. I was hoping we might get a bit into the kitchen life of Le Bernardin, the marinating, the poaching, the sautéing, the roasting. How do you think about time in the context of this space, the kitchen space?
So time is essential in our industry because, as you can imagine, and you know that, clients come at the same time, more or less, like lunchtime is in between 12 and 2, let's say, and dinner at 8 o'clock. Everybody is packed in restaurants, and you have to feed people in a timely manner, delicious food, the food that they ordered on the front of them, in a clean and cold or hot plate, depending on the dish. So time is essential. Before what we call the service, which is when the people are coming for their lunch or dinner, time is essential to get the deliveries, to do the preparations, to get ready for that moment. And then when people are leaving, we still have to take care of the facilities, clean up, get ready for the next meal, and so on. So time is something that we deal with constantly, but it's not stressful. We have the habit of it because we create systems. We put systems in place so we don't stress too much. We also do not want, so I'm talking about time in a different way now. We don't want the employees to be burned. So we make sure that they work a certain amount of hours. They have breaks. They have 2 days off. They have, time to recover and so on. And I think that Also, managing the time like that is part of our success.
And there is this phrase, which I've never actually asked a chef this question, but there's the phrase too many cooks in the kitchen. And I'm curious, if
Too many cooks in a kitchen?
Yeah.
Well, after COVID, I can tell you it doesn't exist.
Well, I think from a time perspective, it is interesting how you balance time and staff, in terms of what each person's doing and how they're doing it and the time they have to do it. How do you determine that? How do you manage that relationship between number of heads in the kitchen and the amount of time they're doing certain tasks? Or
Sure. So we ask our employees what is their preference. Some of them like to work in the morning, and some of them like to work at night, or must work at night, or must work in the morning. So that's the first thing. And then we have two teams, AM and PM. And then when they come to our kitchen, they never left alone on the beginning. We put them in a station that is fairly easy, and they have someone next to them who shows them the task. And they understand that in 1 hour, they must accomplish that much. In 2 hours, that much should be done, and so on. Then, after a while, when we feel confident, and they feel confident as well, because we don't want, again, to have people who are stressed or scared, we leave them on their own and see. It's when we really realize if they are capable or not, because you have to accomplish every task, obviously, on time. And that's the way we work with the team.
from a recipe standpoint, and maybe this is tricky to talk about in an interview, but there are so many recipes you might call time-consuming. And so much of what Le Bernardin is incredibly involved, detail-oriented. It's craft. How do you manage this sort of idea? Like, perhaps we could talk about a specific recipe, like the pan-roasted monkfish on cabbage, or some sort of recipe from a time perspective. I'd love to hear you speak to that.
Sure. The way we use time in cooking is essential, as we know. When you make a sauce, you have to be very patient. Most of the sauce require a lot of time. And you have to not only be cautious with the timing, but also you have to be cautious how you use the heat. You have to domesticate the heat. Some sauce need a very high heat for a very short period of time. Some sauce need a long period of time on very low heat. And it's the way we create our complexity in the sauce. Also, the sauce has a life. And I'm going to give you an example. In a sauce, we use 10, 15 different ingredients. And that sauce that we make has to be consistent for a few hours. You cannot have the flavors collapsing in the middle, or the flavors, like some flavors, killing everything else in a sauce. And I'll give you an example. When you make coffee at home, if you drink coffee, when you brew the coffee, if you drink it right away, it has a certain flavor. If you leave it in a coffee pot for 2 hours, it tastes different. If you drink it at night, it's disgusting, as you know. And it's the same for the sauce. So you have to manage the time, and you have to manage technique to be able to create something successful. Then when we cook the fish, time is essential because fish is very fragile and delicate. So timing is super important. If you cook a steak, 20 seconds extra are not very important. Meat is more forgiven. Fish, 20 seconds, it's a long time. You can overcook your fish, and then instead of having something juicy and with the right texture and so on, you have something chewy or overcooked, dry, that doesn't have any more flavor. So we juggle with time the entire period that we spend at Le Bernardin for cooking. And it's the same for the dining room as well. I mean, everything has a time. They have to read the clients and know if they are in a rush, if they want to eat fast, if they want to take their time, if they want to to spend the entire night for hours and hours. Dealing with time, it's part of our DNA, I would say.
You've noted that it takes 10 years just to master sauce making. From a time perspective, that's also fascinating. It's sort of beyond a PhD.
Yeah, well, it takes 10 years. And even after 10 years, you still learn about sauce. Even after 30 years, I mean, like I started a long time ago, I still learn about sauce. Some ingredients you don't know, but they expand. Like, for instance, if you use some spices, they may expand and become extra spicy or break the balance of the dish by being too strong. Some ingredients will collapse. They will suddenly have no flavor in your sauce. So we learn every day, actually, because we're using always some new ingredients and we're using new techniques. And it's a learning experience that is a lifetime. 10 years, it's really the minimum to understand the sauce. After that, you still learn and learn and learn. So if we can make a comparison, it's like being a judo black belt kind of guy.
Let's go back to your childhood in Andorra.
Yeah.
You know, I'd love for you to share a bit about your mother, who was born in Morocco and owned a popular fashion boutique.
Yeah.
You learned to cook alongside her and your grandmother, and you've noted that she cooked like a Michelin-starred chef every single night.
Yes.
Must have been nice.
It was very nice. She was cooking not only for dinner, she was cooking also for lunch, for the family. And she was taking care of breakfast. And she had a real job, like very busy with her business. And she cooked food that was Michelin-star type of food, inspired by the best chef that existed in France at the time or in Spain. We had every day a table that was different from lunch to dinner. Like the china was different, the glasses were different, the silverwares were not the same, and it was every day different flowers on the table as an arrangement. And then the food, the menus were very, very complex. The food was absolutely delicious, and she was very inspired at the time by Nouvelle Cuisine. So she was reproducing food from the chefs and also putting her little touch. I thought every kid in the world was eating like me. I had no idea how privileged I was. Of course, I realized that much later when I was in culinary school and far away from home. But she really, really inspired me to become the chef that I am today, the cook that I am today.
And, you know, I know you made like breadsticks at age 4, but
yes,
but a lot of this time was spent observing, watching your mother cook. Tell me what that observing did for you.
Sure. So my grandmother, my two grandmothers and my mother were allowing me in the kitchen. But I was very young. I was 5, 6 years old, and then I aged, but I was still watching them. They didn't want me to touch anything because they thought I would mess up the kitchen. I will dirty the counter. So I don't know what they were thinking, but I was only allowed to watch and to eat. So I was tasting a lot of food. What I learned from them was the passion that they had for cooking. I think they were putting so much love in the food. And of course, it's very difficult to prove that food has a difference when it's love in it. It's no scientific research that say, oh, wow, he put love in it and we can feel it. But you can take an apple tart that is gorgeous and that is made in a factory, and then you take an apple tart made with love, and it's maybe not perfect, but you can see the difference, right? So I learned that from them, how to put love in it, how to be passionate, how to be organized, how to be adventurous, how to be loyal to your roots and everything. It's a mine of good things that I learned by being with them.
Of the first 5 years of your life, you said that they were so happy and bright that decades cannot diminish the sunshine and warmth I feel looking back on that time, which is just extraordinary. what changed? Was it your parents' divorce? Was it the arrival of Hugo, this boyfriend and later husband of your mother's?
Well, for sure, when you're a young kid, I was 5 years old when my parents divorced. It's definitely emotionally very hard. I think it's hard for the parents, it's hard for the children. If you have animals, it's the same. It's not a good ambience in a house. It's a lot of tension. So it's not an happy moment. And then, of course, when your parents start again their life with someone else, is a challenge. Hugo, his name in my book is
32 Yolks.
In 32 Yolks is Hugo. His real name is different. I didn't want to say his real name. But anyway, Hugo was not a good person. And I decided that I would not accept having someone who was not a good soul in my house next to me and influencing myself and my mother. So I declare war to him. And as you can imagine, when an 8-year-old kid declare war to an adult, the adult lose for sure. And it's very unfortunate, but I learned a lot of painful lessons from that experience as well. However, it was truth every day. Every day we were stopping the war for the meal time. It was like white flag. We were eating. Everything was perfect. After dinner or lunch, the war was going on again.
And there are these beautiful stories. You talk about your time with him in the mountains, actually, where you were able to cook and share meals together with him and his friends.
Yes, that was very special. I'm grateful to those experiences. We will go and walk for hours and hours with the knapsack. And then we will have those very elaborate picnics, sometimes with the trout that they were catching and cooking on site. So you cannot do better than that in terms of freshness. But we were lucky. I mean, I was not drinking at the time. I was too young, but they had great bottles of Bordeaux and champagne, and it was a celebration over there. And we were eating extremely well. My mother was always packing some great desserts because she knew I had a sweet tooth. We were enjoying life. Yeah, that was probably the good moments that I had with Hugo, and they were exception to the rule.
Yeah, I mean, reading your book, 32 Yolks, I couldn't help but think of Augustine Burroughs' Running with Scissors. I don't know if you read that, but your childhood, as beautiful as so much of it was, there were these very kind of traumatic and challenging, troubling moments. You describe it as a round robin of pain and heartbreak, and Hugo verbally and physically abusing you. At boarding school, there was a situation where the priest who tried to molest you.
Yep.
How did you learn to cope and heal amidst all of this? And how did you learn to manage the anger, I think, most importantly?
Yes. So you, when you are in those situations and you are young, you don't know better. Whatever comes at you, you basically in a survival mode. When Hugo was violent with me or verbally abusing me, I was trying to survive, and that was my daily routine. When I was sent to a school far away from home, and that priest tried to molest me, same thing, surviving, defending yourself, trying to avoid those situations. So with the priest, I was lucky enough to escape, and my mother came right away, and I was basically saved from his craziness. But you create anger, you're right, because you have some bad memories, you have some wounds, and the anger builds up and builds up. And for me, at one point, I was very angry as a child, and then as a young teenager, and then as a young man, I was lucky to discover Buddhism. And I was very interested because I read books from the Dalai Lama. I was arriving in the US, actually, as an angry man. And the Dalai Lama received the Nobel Prize for Peace. And I read the Speech of Acceptance. And I was so inspired by it that I started to read his books, and I started to be interested by the Buddhist philosophy. And it helped me tremendously at the time. Now, I'm talking about 1989, 1990. It's a long time ago. 32 years later, I'm still a Buddhist. It has been a tremendous transformation in myself for my own well-being and for the well-being of people around me. That has been the antidote to the poison.
Hey everyone, taking a quick break here to tell you a little bit about our Season 6 sponsor, L'École School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef & Arpels. Celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, L'École brings together teachers, jewelers, art historians, gemologists, designers, lacquer masters, enamelers, setters, lapidaries, mock-up makers, and others to share their passion and knowledge of jewelry with the world. Through courses, conferences, exhibitions, videos, and book publications, L'École makes the world of jewelry accessible to all. No matter one's experience level, L'École opens up an incredible art form that has long been reserved for a handful of people. Through fresh, pioneering approach, L'École sits at the crossroads of art, gemology, and craftsmanship, and continues to and consolidates knowledge around the fascinating, vast world of jewelry. You can learn more about L'École and its current and upcoming offerings at www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. And now, back to the episode. I was curious to ask you, because I thought maybe in a roundabout way, some of these experiences, awful experiences from your childhood, were a strange preparation for the kitchen and the kind of torments, at least, you might face in your early years in the kitchen anyway, the Robuchon years. And, there's so much to go over in terms of your early kitchen life, your time at culinary school in Perpignan, then at Le Sardinal, Dominique Boucher's La Tour d'Argent.
Sure.
In the time we have together today, I think Robuchon's probably the one I want to touch on. And you did face a lot of verbal challenges there. There was no yelling, but there was a lot of...
No. So in the 90s in France, kitchens were violent. So when you were young and new in a kitchen, you were abused by the chefs, verbally abused, and you were beat up. Like they will kick your butt, they will punch you in the shoulders, they will do all kind of things. And that was the ambience in the kitchen. The philosophy behind that was, we're going to break this young person and we're going to rebuild someone like a superhero of the kitchen. We're going to make it a champion. Of course, it's a wrong philosophy. And we lost a lot of talents in that process because a lot of young kids didn't want to deal with that and they were leaving the kitchens. I believe that the world has changed tremendously since that era, but I was dealing with it. I knew it was part of the process. I was paying my dues. I had the habit of surviving, and I was well trained. Then I go to Robuchon. Robuchon is considered God. It's two gods in the food world, in the 90s, is Robuchon in Paris and Frédéric Girardet in Switzerland, very different personalities. Robuchon was not violent. He was not a screamer and not physical with his team. However, he was extremely persistent in achieving the best quality possible. He was searching for perfection, never found it. And he was basically a torture mind, I guess. And he would basically treat us in a, again, very different way, but in a very painful way because, for instance, I will put a lot of passion into making a sauce. And I will think my sauce is good. And he will come and test it and will say, you see, you will never be associé. You don't care. It doesn't matter to you, right? The flavors don't matter. This is not good. Redo it again. And that would will break your heart.
Always on edge.
Always on the edge. And it was like that all day long. And it was a kind of a painful experience. I almost prefer to be beat up in the shoulders than to deal with that emotional pain. But he was like that. It was his personality. I think he was tougher on himself than he was on us, but it still was a very, very difficult experience. However, I'm very grateful to him because I am where I am today because of his knowledge that he shared with me and the team, and because all of this education in his kitchen.
And it was a militant approach to time in that kitchen, which is sort of funny because you did a year of military training that you've described as a vacation. So you did have something to actually like compare that to. There was even something there, and I wanted to bring this up since this podcast does focus so much on time. There was something there called the PP book. And I was wondering, wondering if you could share what this was, because it has to do exactly about how Robuchon was managing time.
Yes, sure. I want to go back to the military for a second.
Yes.
Military, I felt like I was in vacation. However, I never understood why I was in the military and the purpose. Because to me, everything they were asking us was illogical. We were supposed to take the leaves from one side of the space and bring it on the other side. And when we were done, we were supposed to bring it back to where it was. And I was like, why do we have to do that? There's no logic. At least in Robuchon kitchen, I could understand the frustration because it was a logic about it. Now, the PP book. PP book was interesting because if we wanted to go to the bathroom, we would have to go to the desk, take the keys, and it was a book where you will write your name, the time you take the keys, and the time you bring back the keys. And then Joël Robuchon will look at the book every day and sometimes make comments. Oh, wow, you go that many times to the bathroom, or you stay that many times in the bathroom. It was very interesting. Of course, we hated it. And we were joking about it also at the same time. It was a great piece of conversation. After my military duties, I went back to work for Robuchon, and I couldn't accept that PP book any longer. So I started to play with him a little bit by writing Eric Ripert, 1155, PP, 1157, I give back the key, 3 o'clock, caca, and things like that. And the reaction was very interesting because one day you look at the book and just took the book, the book disappeared, never commented on what I was writing. I have no idea if I had an influence on his reaction or not. I like to believe that I did have an influence.
Humor as a weapon.
Sometimes. Absolutely.
At its heart, your time there was really about rigor, precision, discipline, all things craftsmanship, basically.
Yes.
Now that you've been running things at Le Bernardin for more than 3 decades, what's become your philosophical approach, I suppose, to cooking and running a kitchen and ultimately craftsmanship? Are there mantras you follow? Are there things you still think about from your time in the Robuchon kitchen that you're carrying with you today?
Well, I learned a lot of things in my early career, including Robuchon. I don't want the cooks to be shaking and to be stressed because I've been there. And I know that someone who's terrorized or scared will not do a better job than someone that is inspired to do a good job. So I'm really, really militant at creating an ambience in our kitchen that is a good ambience for everyone to find his spot and to evolve and to have a good experience with us. It's not an easy experience. Kitchens are not easy. It's hot, it's humid, it's a lot of sharp objects everywhere. There's a lot of things that make kitchens not easy. You have to stand on your feet for a long time. So we know that. But I do not accept people who abuse people. I do not accept the fact that it could be a bad ambience in a kitchen. It could be a bad ambience in between dining room and kitchen. Le Bernardin is one place where we all have the same goal. is to please and create an experience for the client, and also for us to be rewarded in what we're supposed to have the passion for. So some people have passion for being in a dining room, sommeliers for with the wine, and cooks obviously about cooking, and in pastry about baking and so on. So we put a lot of efforts into making sure that every day we are challenged, of course, because we have some bad moments. It's not like it's nirvana over there.
Yeah, mistakes happen.
We make mistakes. We deal with situations that are very surprising sometimes. Like tonight, supposedly the weather is going to be bad. I don't know if it's true or not. We may have a big storm and everybody comes at the same time. Instead of being, people at 7:30, 7:45, 8, 8:30, we may get everybody late. And then it's a huge struggle to create an experience that is seamless. So we may be super, super challenged, but we will do it without fear. And that is really something that I'm not compromising. Ambience in the kitchen, the way we treat the employees, every employee has to be treated with respect. And then, of course, we have respect for the ingredients. We have the respect for the planet. And this is something that is a lot in the news lately, but it's not new. We have to respect the ingredients, especially seafood. You imagine mishandling seafood. You have a mediocre ingredient with something mediocre. Even if you're a genius, at the end is mediocre. We have to support the fishermen and people who practice farming in the right way. We have to think about the well-being of our planet and the well-being of humanity. We are taking care of all those aspects on a daily basis, constantly thinking about how can we be, I would call it, sustainable in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, your most recent cookbook was about vegetarian cooking.
Yes.
Or focused on. And this is clearly an area you've been thinking a lot about. I mean, as you note in the book, it goes back to your childhood and a lot of your mother's recipes.
For sure.
Of course, there are also big conversations happening around this in the food world and the fine dining world, like with Daniel Hume at 11 Madison Park. Or
Yes.
You've been also bringing in different sorts of ingredients to the fair at Le Bernardin. So I was hoping you might share a little bit about that.
Sure. So first of all, we do not serve species that are endangered. And we do not use ingredients that come from farms that are factory farms. Or even if we're talking only about vegetables and fruits, we use only organic as much as we can. It's very difficult sometimes in the winter to get 100% of organic products. But we try to be organic and sensitive to farming or fishing. So that is something that we are very militant about. It takes an army to, you have to basically convince your entire team that is the right thing to do. And it takes time. And we're learning again about practice, the good practices and so on. Now, Daniel Hume went in a direction that is very extreme. He went from having a restaurant that was serving meat and seafood and all kind of food. And today, 11 Madison is vegan. And I admire Daniel, and he's an extremely talented chef. At Le Bernardin, I decided to take a solution that is less extreme. We have a vegetarian tasting menu. We have a vegan tasting menu. We have our menu, which is basically seafood, because Le Bernardin is specialized in seafood. And I like to give people options. When I did the vegetarian book, I said in the book, I'm not judging your habits. This is a book that is inspired by my childhood, dishes that I loved, dishes that I served in the summer in my country house when I invite people, dishes that I eat the entire year. But if you want to eat a steak, eat a steak. I'm not a vegan myself. I'm not a vegetarian. I eat seafood. I eat meat. I eat more vegetables actually today. But I like to give options to people, and I like to educate myself first and the team, and then let the clients decide what they want. If you want to come to Le Bernardin and have a vegan experience, Well, we're going to make sure that you have a great time. And if you come and you have some seafood, it's fantastic. And if you want a steak, we can give you a steak as well. It's a matter of different approach in between being very extreme and black and white. I like what we call the middle way. And so it's in between black and white. We take that middle ground.
And Le Bernardin is rooted in Brittany and the coast of France. And I think, excising seafood, for example, would be like excising the root of the tree.
Yes, for sure. I have no intention of stopping serving seafood at Le Bernardin. We are a seafood restaurant. This is our DNA. Those are our roots. It's our soul. It's what we are. Now, we are giving more options, and actually we are having a lot of fun, and I believe it's good to have those vegetarian options on our menu. Again, we support small fishermen that have small boats, day boats. They go, they catch the fish, they bring it back. We're not supporting factory boats, huge companies who have terrible practices. Our scallops, they don't come from a boat that drags the bottom of the ocean and destroys everything. They are harvested by scuba divers. It's the way we are working. We are very sensitive, very mindful about all the elements that we believe we can control to make a better world and to make a better experience for everybody, or for the well-being of all. Let's put it this way.
So to go back to sort of where we began 50 years.
Yeah.
What do you attribute to this endurance? What do you attribute to?
We are stubborn. I'm joking. It's the team. It's essential to create a team that believes in your vision and that is very supportive of what you are trying to achieve. As you can imagine, by myself, I cannot do much. In a restaurant, if you by yourself, you cannot cook everything, serve everything, clean. It's impossible. You need.
It makes me think of Chez Jacques.
Jacques was interesting because he was by himself in a kitchen and he had his wife in a dining room, but he was doing 20 covers and it was one menu a day and it was only what he wanted to serve you and was no choice. Le Bernardin is a different model. I mean, I would be maybe amused by doing something like Jacques for a few weeks or a few months, but then I want to do Le Bernardin. This is what I want to live on every day of my life, that experience with my team and the clients and the purveyors and everybody involved with Le Bernardin.
Even at a, let's say 100-seat scale, though, you maintain an intimacy.
Yes.
And I think that that's important to point out. And that intimacy even starts in the kitchen and with the staff across the restaurant. Could you speak to some of the people who have been with you for this time?
Yes, we have Vincent Robinson, who's our associate, started in 1986.
He precedes you.
5 years before me. He was a line cook. When I started, I thought, wow, he's very talented. He's from Barbados. He has a lot of qualities. And he evolved in the kitchen and then he became our associate. And nobody makes a better sauce than Vincent. Then we have in the dining room, for instance, a couple of captains that started as dishwashers. And then they learn English. And then we were like, wow, they learning English and they have some interest. They want to get out of the dishwashing station. Let's give them opportunities. And it's by giving opportunities that you create loyalty from your team. And we have a lot of people who are at Le Bernardin for many, many, many years. I mean, Eric, who's in charge of the kitchen right now, while I'm talking to you, is at Le Bernardin since 1994. I mean, it's a long time. And we have maybe a third of the team that is like that has spent more than 10 years at Le Bernardin.
Before we finish, I wanted to end on two subjects.
Sure.
One, you already talked about Buddhism, and the other, I just really felt that I wanted to touch on, which was your relationship with Anthony Bourdain.
Mhm.
And you had this extraordinary friendship with him. Eater once wrote, "There's perhaps no greater bromance on television than the one between Anthony Bourdain and Eric Ripert." You traveled to Napa Valley, Chicago, Paris, Peru, Marseille, China, and the French Alps with him for his TV shows. He even visited Le Bernardin on an episode of No Reservations. How do you think now about all this time you got to spend with him, and what stands out to you from all of that time together?
I cooked at Les Halles too because he made me go to Les Halles and he challenged me to be the grill guy for the night, which was fun. What you see on TV is, of course, a reflection of the friendship that I had with Anthony, but it's television. And it was Anthony's show, and I was there as the sidekick of Anthony. I was there to help him to create the best show possible with me in it when I was with him. In real life, our friendship was also very vivid and vibrant, and we were very close. I think opposite attracts because we were very different. Anthony was coming from a different world. I'm talking about professionally in the kitchen. He was coming from kitchens where they had pirates in it. And I was coming from a kitchen of Robuchon where it's like Catholic school. So we were coming from very different environments. And we were also very often disagreeing on subjects and so on. But we always had that tremendous respect and friendship and love for each other. And it was very powerful. And Anthony said I was his best friend. He was my best friend. And we had some great time, of course, on television, but television, it's work. And but we had a lot of good time, believe me. But outside, it was even more interesting. And we spent a lot of time together, including weekends, vacations, and so on.
The story of this 2-decade friendship, it also makes me think about how you were able to build this incredible relationship with your father and unfortunately lost him when you were quite young. You've lost these incredible sort of male partners, figures, including, the very man who brought you into Le Bernardin. And I just wanted to hear kind of how you think about loss and how that ties into the Buddhism, because, Bourdain and Buddhism are connected in this kind of profound way.
For sure. And Anthony was an atheist, but he always said that if he would have been religious, he would have been a Buddhist. And I think he had a lot of respect for the philosophy. And Buddhism is something that is very complex, but when Buddha, which means the enlightened man, started to teach, he decided to create 3 baskets. One which was philosophical, one that was scientific, and one was purely religious. And I believe Anthony was interested by the philosophical aspect and potential scientific aspect, and probably not interested by the religious aspect of it. Yes, I have lost a lot of loved ones in my life, people that were very close to me, but life is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. And that's why we have to be very grateful for when we have good times, learn from when we have a bad time, and live the present fully, because the future doesn't exist yet. The past is past. And the only way to live fully is to be right now in the present and very focused. Everything is impermanent. Everything changed. From the beginning of this interview to now, a lot of things have changed. We don't see it sometimes. Sometimes it's very subtle. Sometimes it's not that subtle. But as human beings, as sentient beings, we know that since the millennium of second that we are born, we are going to one direction. And we don't know when is the end. And the end could be in a fraction of seconds, in years. It's what it is. It's life. And I'm not trying to rationalize the fact that it's painful when someone dies and so on. Of course, it's very painful. And you live with it, and we have no choice. It's part of our life in this world until it's our turn to get out. So that's pretty much the end.
I don't want to end there because it would seem like almost bleak, but also too obvious. Just to throw one last question in, your experience and time spent studying, reading, learning about Buddhism, and just time spent meditating, how does that impact your non-studying, meditating, reading time?
Well, so I meditate every morning, and I do my practice every morning, and I read and I study on a daily basis. Except when I travel and it's difficult, but this is it's my ritual. It's usually on the morning. It happens. If you practice meditation on compassion, for instance, right? And let's suppose you meditate on compassion in general, it probably won't have an impact on people that are suffering in the world, but it will have an impact on yourself. Instead of developing bad habits, right? Like anger, for instance, or whatever negative emotions you can have, you're creating a new path in yourself. And the chances are, after repetitive meditations on compassion, you will probably create a compassionate mind, a compassionate heart, and you will see the world with a more compassionate way. And I'm using the compassion, but I could use many other subjects. We can take love, and love in Buddhist terms is to make sure that you make someone happy, and you go to the root to the happiness of that person. Compassion is when you want someone not to suffer, and you do everything possible to avoid suffering for that person, or for the world, or for the animals, or for anything. So meditation and practice are changing you slowly. It's not like overnight, suddenly you are the Dalai Lama. And by the way, I am not the Dalai Lama. I'm far away from that. But I'm really trying to do the right thing and to be a good person. And of course, I have my moments. And of course, it's not easy all the time. And I can be also a bit difficult at times, or maybe a lot difficult, I don't know. But at least I know that my practice is guiding me to do the right things. And I'm very passionate about making a good impact in our world. And again, that meditation or studies are transforming my mind, and I see things in a different way.
Eric, thank you so much for your time today. This is great.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and giving me a voice.
Extra thanks to our Season 6 sponsor, L'École, School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef & Arpels. A unique place for learning, L'École welcomes the general public to the world of jewelry through courses, conferences, exhibitions, videos, and book publications. You can find out more about L'École at www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. And thank you for listening. You can find more episodes of Time Sensitive on our website, timesensitive.fm, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can listen to our other podcasts at a distance by heading to atadistancepodcast.com. You can follow us on Instagram at slowdown.tv. And if you like our programs, please be sure to subscribe and leave comments. Our theme music was composed by Billy Martin. This episode was produced by Ramon Broza, Emily Zhang, and Johnny Simon.